I'm just going to wait for some of our participants to gather. Good evening. My name is Fran Casey, and I'm the Director of Community Affairs here at DePaul, and we are so delighted that you're all here tonight. This is a very special program. I think that's why you're all here. And because it is a very special program, we have a very special person to welcome you this evening. President of DePaul University, Father Dennis Holtschneider, and we are delighted that he's here too.
Good evening. Oh, that's kind of like church. It's wonderful to be with you today. I'd like to welcome Jan back to our campus, our panelists who are here today, all those who have really given so much time over the years to chronicling the history of this wonderful part of Chicago. Both the members of the DePaul community, the members of the neighborhood, of course our friends in the various neighborhood associations with whom we've worked so closely all these years, and just all of you who came this evening. Welcome to be here. It's I suspect that it's not often that when you're talking about the history of something, you're also making history at the same moment. But it kind of feels like that a little bit tonight. We're chronicling history even as history is being made. The next chapter in the life of one of our neighbors of whom we're very fond. I don't know that Julia Foster Porter would completely recognize her hospital today if she saw it. From the 8 beds that she put into a very small building 130 years ago down on the corner. But I have to say, I think she'd be pleased. But it started out, I think, with something that's still true today, a great care for children, especially in their most vulnerable moments, and the simultaneous care for their families. And it has been a blessing to this neighborhood all these years for us to have them in our midst. It became a very personal thing for me. I'd only been at DePaul a few weeks when some friends of mine were visiting from out of town, and their child got sick while here quite unexpectedly, and they literally ran their child down the blocks to go to Children's, and Children's was there for them. It's been a real blessing for so many. And I think we're thrilled for new facilities for them, and we're a little sad here in Lincoln Park to watch them take this next step. But mostly we're thrilled for the children of the city and all beyond who come to Chicago and come to this hospital for their care. So if I can use this moment, because I don't know if I'll get another moment, and that's to thank children for all they've done for this neighborhood all these years, and to thank them for what the opportunities they've given our students here at DePaul to learn their nursing craft, just to volunteer, to see a world with a little more struggle and challenge in it than their own, so they see a little bit more of life and grow in their own wisdom. This has been a blessing for generations of DePaul students as well, besides all of us who live here. And it's been our great honor to call them our neighbor. So that I was in Pat Lagoon's office the other day, and we agreed across the table that we would try to continue to work together regardless. And this weekend I was thrilled to watch our students dance their way to $103,000 over 24 hours for the hospital. I will give them your applause because I didn't earn it myself. I cheered for them. But it was a beautiful thing. It was beautiful to watch them. And so many of the families who had children and children's came down to talk to them each hour through the 24-hour period, even very late at night, to talk about what good this institution does. And so I welcome all of you here tonight. I thank you for all that you've done for the world and for DePaul, and I wish you very well. And to our neighbors and communities here, God bless you, welcome.
Thank you, Father Holtschneider. I think you can probably all see why we think we're very fortunate to have Father as the president of DePaul University. I too wish to welcome you. Tonight is the 24th Lincoln Park Community Research Initiative program. We have been celebrating and exploring the history of Lincoln Park since DePaul's centennial year, which was 1998 to 1999. We've been presenting programs on the history of Lincoln Park twice a year since that time. Tonight is a particularly special program for us, and we have a particularly special moderator, Ms. Janet Davies from ABC 7 News in Chicago. Janet is the feature and entertainment reporter for Channel 7 News, and she's been here since, I believe, 1984. That'd be right. She came to us from Cincinnati, where she began her broadcasting career in the late 70s. In addition to, is that right?
How old am I?
22, that's your story, you're sticking to it. In addition to her career as a very successful broadcaster here in Chicago, Janet has been on the corporate board of Children's Memorial Hospital for many years, is very familiar with the children's story, has participated and hosted many of their events, and so we were particularly thrilled to have her join us this evening. And Janet is going to come to the stage and introduce our very illustrious panelists. So without further ado, Janet Davies.
Thank you, Fran. Good evening. Oh, you're right, it is like church. Good evening. All right, we're awake now. I have been in one way, shape, or form affiliated with Children's Memorial Hospital for 27 years. I will tell you, when we began to do the Children's Miracle Network telethon, I don't know if many of you remember that, some of you, I think, worked on it. Some of you actually were there. It was a very special project that ABC 7 was able to do in conjunction with the Children's Miracle Network and with Children's Memorial. We did 15 telethons and raised millions of dollars, and it was a wonderful experience of meeting great and courageous children and their families and doctors and nurses and people so involved in just making sure that our kids stay healthy. And I think back to when I used to roam the halls before there was a whole lot of security, and Erin Shields is right here. She would roam them with me in a camera, and I'd be so interested in the hospital because I'd love to find out the history of what went on in this wing and this old wing, and she'd go, you're not allowed there. But we'd get in there somehow anyway, wouldn't we, Erin? That place is and was magical because so many miracles happened there. And that ground, whatever goes in there, will always be an almost hallowed ground because so many lives were changed there. So many little lives either got better or may not have, but it was a special place, and now it's going to become an even more special place in Streeterville. So tonight we're going to celebrate what Children's Memorial Hospital has been to Lincoln Park all these years. And we have a great, great group of people helping us out right now. We have Dr. Stan Shulman, who is the division head of infectious diseases at Children's Memorial. We have Susan Hayes Gordon, who's with Community Relations and Government Affairs. We have the president of the Founders Board, in my day I knew it as the Woman's Board, Sarah Baine. We also have a young lady whose mother, and she brought pictures of herself as a 5-year-old when we would do telethon stories, and now she's all grown up. She's been involved with children's a long, long time. She now works there, and she's married since October to a lovely Londoner. Where's Tom? Raise your hand, Tom. I'm going to embarrass you. There. That's a miracle story right there. We have an incredible panel. And I want you to listen to what they have to say, and then we want to hear your involvement when we do the open mic. And just a little housekeeping here. You see these microphones right here in the middle? That's where we'll ask you to come up and state your question for our panel. But first, Dr. Shulman is going to give us a little presentation about Children's Memorial. Oh, there you are.
Thank you so much. I'd really like to thank Father Holzsnyder, the DePaul University, all the members of the DePaul Lincoln Park Community Research Initiative for honoring Children's Memorial Hospital tonight. And special thanks to Fran Casey and to Julie Ems and to Janet Davies for participating in this evening, as well as the panelists that you'll soon hear from. And I've been given the charge to talk about the 130-year history of Children's Memorial Hospital in 10 minutes or so. And that's a pretty tall order, and I'm going to see what I can do. And I think we need to start with Mrs. Julia Foster Porter, who was born in 1846, and from the age of 13, she lived at Clark and Belden. Her family lived at Clark and Belden. She was certainly the epitome of a Lincoln Parker, I think. Her family was among Chicago's civic and business elite. And it's actually said that the house that she grew up in was the most northern house in Chicago that was damaged, destroyed by the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. But she married a Reverend Porter, who was a Yale graduate and an Andover graduate in 1866 when she was 20 years old. But then a series of tragedies occurred in Julia Foster Porter's life. In 1874, her father died of a freak head injury, and 2 years later, her husband died at age 36 of appendicitis, right here in Lincoln Park. And 5 years after that, in 1881, her 13-year-old son, Maurice Porter, died of acute rheumatism, which we now know as acute rheumatic fever. And Mrs. Porter mourned the rest of her life. She wore long black gown, dresses buttoned up very tightly, and mourned forever. But she went ahead the following year, after her son's tragic death, to found the Maurice Porter Memorial Hospital in 1882. There is no picture of that building, but the Porter family owned a lot of real estate around here, and one of the pieces of property that they owned was on the southeast corner of Belden and Halstead. And in that small house, Mrs. Porter established an 8-bed hospital, but she immediately knew that that wasn't going to be enough. And in 1884, 2 years later, she built this house. That's Mrs. Porter in a less mournful pose, I think. But she built this house on the corner of Orchard and Fullerton, the northwest corner, where the Nellie Black building now stands, which is a Children's Memorial Hospital office building. And that building, this building here, allowed for 20 to 22 beds of hospital care. This is the oldest picture, I believe, of any medical activity at the hospital. This is from about 1886, and shows Dr. Truman W. Miller in his surgical clinic at the Maurice Porter Hospital. Now, Dr. Miller was the physician who took care of Mrs. Porter's husband as well as her son. And in fact, he signed her son's death certificate, which we discovered in the vault not too long ago. Mrs. Porter asked Dr. Miller to become the chief of staff of this hospital that she had founded, and he served as the chief of staff from 1882 until 1900 when he died. And this is a picture of one of the wards housing approximately 8 children in that building from 1884. So in 1904, the hospital decided to purchase the triangle of land that is bordered by Lincoln Avenue, Fullerton on the north, and Orchard on the east. And this was purchased in 1904, and several buildings were put up along Fullerton Avenue. So I'm not sure I have a pointer here, but what we see here, looking north, are several buildings that are on the southern side of Fullerton in this triangle. Just on the other side of the buildings would be Fullerton Avenue. And there was this large grassy hospital grounds that existed for a very long period of time. And over time, buildings cropped up with, obviously in a planned fashion, in this area. And by 1908, the hospital had a capacity of 108 beds in its various buildings. This is a drawing of what the campus looked like in about 1940. Shown in the upper left corner is the original, not the original, but the 1884 house. And shown here is Fullerton is running up towards the upper right-hand corner. Orchard is a street running down towards the lower right-hand corner. In the foreground then would be the Nellie Black building, which was built as a nurse's residence and residence in about 1931. And then a series of buildings along the southern side of Fullerton, a series of buildings there, and then buildings along Orchard as well. Again, with this, I think you can make an area of unspoiled land, if you will, to the south of and west of most of the buildings. So I'm not sure the last time that we had elephants outside of the zoo in Lincoln Park, but this picture is actually taken sort of where the previous. If we would be looking north towards that building there, the Agnes Wilson Memorial Building, where it seems to have some tents there. But that's the area where various kinds of entertainment with the circus animals and including the elephants would take place. And you can see the children gathered around, obviously having a great time. This is an aerial view around 1950. This is Lincoln Avenue going straight up. This is Orchard going diagonally along towards the right. And I hope you can make out, I wish I had a pointer, I hope you can make out there's a gas station at the very point of Belden, Orchard, and Fullerton, right opposite the John Barley, where the John Barley corner is now. There's a gas station. And there's also a liquor sign just above for early times. And there's a parking lot, the hospital parking lot, which was on the east side of Lincoln. And obviously there's no hospital property on the west side of Lincoln at that particular time. My office is actually in a building at the very point of Lincoln and Fullerton it's an old bank building, which is about 100 years old. And in the basement is a vault in which lots of money, I'm sure, was kept at one time, and some hospital artifacts and historical items have been there. So the major construction from this point forward. From this point forward, major construction took place in 1960 to 1962 to put up our current big bed tower. And also shortly after, the big parking garage on the west side of Lincoln was constructed. The Kroc building was built on the southern part of the triangular property, and where the gas station is, and a couple little buildings just next to the gas station. And I think you can see this view from the construction. This is Lincoln Avenue, in about 1960 or 61, as that parking lot has been destroyed, and the land is being turned into a street, Children's Plaza, which runs from Lincoln to Fullerton, and the big, all the construction of the research building as well as the bed tower is taking place. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. Since then, of course, there's been additional construction at the Belden building at the corner of Halsted and Belden at the site of the original 1882 hospital. The Children's Memorial Research Center building up on Halsted, just north of Fullerton. And the hospital has evolved into obviously, an absolutely world-class institution, and I don't have time to talk about all the wonderful things that go on there. I do want to mention, some of you would be interested in the history of the academic affiliations of the hospital. From 1909 to 1919, there was an affiliation with Rush Medical College, which basically involved instruction of nurses. And in 1919, the affiliation changed to the University of Chicago, which actually turned out to be a pretty stormy and unsatisfying relationship that lasted until 1946. Dr. Joseph Brenneman, who I'll talk about in a second, did organize as early as 1921 some postgraduate courses for the University of Chicago students in pediatrics at the hospital, and other things in 1930, but it really wasn't very successful. And in 1946, the University of Chicago established its own department of pediatrics. That's where I went to school and was actually a chief resident at the University of Chicago. And in 1946, in what was really a brilliant move, an affiliation was struck with Northwestern University Medical School, which has lasted to the present time. And I will skip over the details for this presentation. I do want to mention a couple of absolute luminaries in the world of pediatric medical care who really graced the land in the hospital in Lincoln Park and at Children's Memorial Hospital. This is Dr. Joseph Brenneman, who was the chief of staff of the hospital from 1921 to 1940. He became the first paid full-time physician at the hospital in 1930. So he was chief of staff for the first 10 years, really as a volunteer physician, and all the physicians who worked at the hospital providing care prior to that time were volunteer physicians. But in 1930, Brenneman became the full-time paid chief of staff and served in that role with great distinction until 1940. He really was a world-renowned pediatrician, probably one of the one or two most respected pediatricians in the world during his period. He was president of the American Pediatric Society. He was an outstanding teacher, and he authored a very innovative multi-volume textbook that's a classic in the annals of pediatrics. Dr. John Bigler became the chief of staff of the hospital in 1949 and served until 1962. And he really accelerated the hiring of full-time faculty in all kinds of areas of pediatrics, surgery, radiology, and other specialties. And he recognized the value that for children to become a really first-rank institution, that research was going to have to be an important part of the mission of the hospital. And that was sort of a revolutionary concept for the institution at that time. Two extremely important surgeons need to be mentioned. This is Caesar the dog. This is Dr. Willis J. Potts. And this is Diane Schnell. And Dr. Potts became the chief of surgery at the hospital in 1946 and served as surgeon-in-chief till 1960. And he was a pioneer pediatric surgeon, particularly a pediatric heart surgeon. And in 1946 and 47, children received worldwide acclaim because of the operation that Dr. Potts devised to save children who were born as blue babies. They had various forms of congenital heart disease that made them cyanotic. They couldn't get enough oxygen. Many of these children died very early in life. There was an operation developed in Boston that could help older children, bigger children, but nothing that could help the younger children. So that at the time Dr. Potts was worried about this situation, all the physicians could do was to keep children alive until they were hopefully alive long enough that they could tolerate the Blalock, what was called the Blalock-Taussig shunt procedure. So Dr. Potts, using Caesar the dog and other dogs, devised experimental techniques and actually devised innovative kinds of equipment, certain clamps, vascular clamps that could be used to fix children like this. And Diane was his first human patient who survived until she was in her 60s as a consequence of his heroic surgical intervention. This is another such patient. This happens to be a family friend of ours. This is Sue Ellen Miller, who had the same kind of congenital heart disease, and here she is at the age of 2 with her nurse at the hospital. Here she is at the age of 58 with Dr. Carl Backer, our current head of cardiovascular surgery, and they're explaining and talking about with using this model heart, how Sue Ellen's tetralogy of flow with a right pulmonary artery with a right aortic arch, was able to survive and well into adulthood, and she had also lived to be about 60 years old from an illness, despite an illness that would have killed her had Dr. Potts not made his moral contribution. And the last individual I want to talk about is Dr. Orvar Swenson. I'm sad to report that last Monday, Dr. Swenson passed away at the age of 103. Dr. Swenson was the surgeon-in-chief at Children's from 1960 to 1973. And he also developed very innovative surgery for a condition, he's particularly worldwide known for surgery to correct what is called Hirschsprung's disease, which is a congenital abnormality of the lower bowel that lacks appropriate innervation and congenitally, and was often a fatal disease in young children. Dr. Swenson also developed surgical procedures for other kinds of abdominal abnormalities of children. And again, really his fame was truly worldwide. And Dr. Swenson, up until a couple years ago, was coming to Children's for an annual lectureship in his name. But I simply went on Google yesterday to find a picture for this presentation, and the first thing that came up was his obituary from last Monday. But he had a very long and extremely productive life. So lastly, I'd like to just mention that a symbol of Children's Memorial Hospital has been a bambino. And the bambinos are terracotta sculptures developed by Della Robbia in Florence, Italy, in the 15th century. And there's a foundling home, an orphanage in Florence that is in existence since 1490 or 1470 that is studded with various bambini along the top of the facade of the front of the building. And this became a symbol of pediatric care at Children's Memorial Hospital, and it was also has been adopted by the American Academy of Pediatrics as one of their symbols. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. And lastly, I had the opportunity this afternoon to spend 3 hours at the new Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital, seeing where my new office would be and where patients will be. And it's going to be a wonderful facility, but we're going to miss Lincoln Park very, very much. Thank you very much for your attention, and I think we'll have a panel discussion. Thank you.
Let's not forget that you are a luminary too. Yes, you are. Infectious diseases. This is the guy. Can we have the rest of our panelists come up? Susan? Maggie? What we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of them just to give a little overview or a little presentation themselves, and then we'll do a little discussion, and then we'll open it up to questions. This is fascinating. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about children's, but your presentation just wowed me. I did not realize all that was happening. All right. I'm going to ask you to move down. I'm going to go on the end. There we go. Susan, let's start with you. Do you mind? Okay. Because let's do a little community relations. Everybody turned on? In a good way? All right. I think since you're down there.
Okay, so actually, if you don't mind, so Janet is, I'm almost here as long as Janet. And so we know each other from being on the telethon. That I was just working it. She was there with slippers on, interviewing all the guests and staying up all night long. But since we know each other for a really long time, I want to just ask you if you don't mind if Sarah goes back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Number 2 is Sarah and Maggie, and you want to be last.
I'm going to close her, and I'm so sorry. So
No,
that's okay.
no,
That's
okay.
fine with me.
Sarah.
Yes.
That's fine. First of all, explain what the Founders Board is, because that's all new to me too.
Oh, you're so nice that I get to say that, because I'm very proud of the heritage of the Founders Board, because we trace our roots right to Julia Foster Porter. When in 1882 she opened this hospital, and she bought the land, and she and her board of lady managers ran the hospital. They raised all the money, they covered all the costs, and they made all the decisions that were to be made. And they continued making all those decisions and raising the money until 1904, when they added on a board of directors. But during that time, then, they covered all the costs. Dr. Truman Miller donated his time, and their care was always to treat the neediest of children at no cost. And that continued to be a part of our philosophy forever and ever.
Maggie has been at this hospital since the age of what?
3.
3. And she's still there, but in the capacity of an employee of the hospital. And what do you do, Maggie?
I work in the foundation, and I work in donor relations to thank all of our lovely donors for, helping us keep our institution alive.
And tell everybody why you went to Children's.
I have a genetic disease called cystic fibrosis, and I was diagnosed at 13 months of age. It is a disease that affects the lungs and digestive system, and it creates thick, sticky mucus throughout the body that makes it hard to breathe and hard to digest food. So I have lots of treatments daily, and I've been in the hospital. My husband did the lovely math for me. Approximately, what was it? 2.7 consecutive years would add up to my time in the hospital over my 24 years of life to treat my lung infections and keep me alive.
And just overall, what has been some of the highlights of your experience there? Has it been the nurses, the doctors? I don't know. What?
I would say it's really everybody, every staff person there, every person coming into my hospital room with a smile, from the people who clean the room, from the people who give me the injections, to the doctors who give me the treatment plan, and the cooks in the cafeteria. They all have a certain, they all have a smile on their face and just are really happy to be part of Children's, and that's what made my experience so great. I have so many great memories, and a lot of my childhood memories are of that hospital and not school, because I was there so often, and those people have made my life wonderful, and I've made so many friends there.
Why did you decide to work there?
I couldn't get away. I love the mission, and I love what they have done for me, and I wanted to give back to such an amazing institution. And I've been so happy to be part of Children's now in Lincoln Park, and I've been so happy to be part of Ann Arbor Children's Hospital in Chicago and see that become part of our youth history. And it's been exciting. So I've always wanted to give back, and this is my way.
Since you are a CF patient, what strides and innovations have you seen this hospital create and give to you?
They've made lots of strides with different treatments for cystic fibrosis. In the 1950s, kids with CF did not live past elementary school, and now we're living into our 30s and 40s. It's not great, but it's made huge strides. And Ann Harris, who is part of the research center, has done great things for CF and is researching the different bacteria that get stuck in our lungs. And they're coming up with all different clinical trials, and a lot of patients with CF at Children's are part of these clinical trials to keep us living longer.
Before I get to Susan, one last thing. When you were younger, it had to be scary. Going to the hospital is always scary for a youngster. But were there things there that made you feel better, feel comfortable, feel safe?
Most definitely. I still remember the first nurse I had when I was 6. Her name was Lisa. And it was midnight, and I sat in this hospital room for the first time, and she sat on my bed and put her hand on my leg and said, "It'll be okay." And she also comforted my parents. And I had a resident whose name was Chip. I remember him. I was 7, and he played Uno with me. And he tried to cheat when I went to the bathroom. And he had all the draw 4s, and I was amazed. And it took me a while to catch on, but I remember these people, and I still have friendships with these nurses and doctors, and they weren't just there to take care of the physical, but the emotional, and they were there to hold me when I was crying, upset about something, and they were there to beat me at Uno, or just sit with me and listen to what I had to say. So it's really the people that make that hospital. If all the walls crumbled, it would be standing because of the people that work there.
Oh my gosh, that's what we call a great example. Absolutely.
So one of the great things about Children's is that as early as 1891, they really established that the mission was to treat the whole child, to be as forward-thinking as we could about the medical, but to really treat the whole child. And historically, we've done that through our family services and through a lot of philanthropy. As I was reading early in the history of the hospital, families started giving milk to the hospital. And then they decided that wasn't enough to get milk for the babies. And they built a special little building where the mothers would come and learn what to do with the milk and how to feed the babies and how to take care of the babies. And then, developed other things. They had ice cream socials and all sorts of parties. So that we always knew that we had a family, that a child was part of a family. That was an important thing to do.
How did your board change from the time it started to what it is now? The powerhouse of fundraising it is now.
I think so many of our members have had a story to them. We really link up to something. And again, we began sort of covering everything that the board of directors came in, and other, government started paying, people started paying for their own care. Early on, nobody paid. Then they were asked, well, if you could pay $1 a day, it would be okay. And then, we began charging people. So we had to look for other ways to help support the mission of the hospital, endowing chairs, programs, doctors, family services.
Susan, you want to talk now?
I want to say,
can you hear me? Yes.
you need to ask Maggie where she.
It's not on? Okay.
Oh, wait, I know, we had to wait till it turned green.
Oh, I have to
Put it up there.
Yeah. Okay.
Stand up.
Can you ask Maggie where she went to college, please?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
where'd you go to college?
I went to DePaul University. Why? I fell in love with the city as a kid, looking out my window and seeing this great city, and I knew there was a wonderful university within the neighborhood of Lincoln Park. And I think my parents felt safe with me being so close to the hospital. I could get a great education, and I loved it.
Wow. Excellent. Susan, want to say anything?
Yes.
Susan is going to talk about the relationship with the hospital and Lincoln Park.
I know. But first, I want to say one more reason why people are involved in our mission. And that is,
You're fine. You know what?
why is this
Right
being
here.
cooking? Okay. Should I just?
We can hear you fine. Just
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that people who have happy stories and who have sad stories are so transformed their lives by what happens to the child, which is, the love of their life, that they take that experience and they channel it into something good. neighborhood, which has been for us our great fortune that they come and be on the founders board or the board or a volunteer or a community person like you all, because our mission only works because it's being held up by so many different pockets of good people. You know, it's the parents of the children, it's the donors, it's the caregivers themselves, it's the community leaders and neighbors, the vendors. We're all carrying this mission together, and that's why it works. And if one prong of it pulls out, like, oh, the government, I can say that. God bless the government. If one prong falls out, the mission, oh my gosh, it's not going to work. And so I just had to say that kind of because I have that image in my head about everybody marching forward into the future together. And we're so grateful back to the community for the remarkable experience that we have had being neighbors in this community. When I got here 25 years ago, it was a little rocky. We didn't know each other well enough, and we were on the eve of some big projects, including developing the research center, the Belden Halstead building, which is the office building there right now. We were the parking garage, the heliport. You know, these are big changes in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood back then was really afraid of what is this institution doing, just taking over, taking this, taking that, and people were truly afraid. And fear is a very strong emotion, and especially when you don't know each other. So we had the opportunity through really smart people. I think is Walt probably here right now. He's here. With DePaul as our example, because DePaul had some things to iron out themselves with the community, and they hired a third-party negotiator to help work through what the issues were, get to know each other, work out a master plan. And so with them as an example, and Walt Crowley coming in to see Earl Frederick, our then CEO, and saying, "Sir, you need a third-party negotiator here." And that was Tom Coffey of the Haymarket Group. And so therein began the relationship that started rocky. I had a colleague, Dennis Kepchar, who used to say to me, you know, you should really wear a turtleneck when you're in these community meetings because it got so heated. But over time, and thanks to so many of you who are in this room right now, I'm going to just mention some of them because it wouldn't have happened but for you. Alan Ballas, from Nora Wolf, Judy Marone, Pat Deering, Vi Daly, head of the North, and then our alderman. Judy Casey, Sheffield, Ken Feldbein, Ted Roleski, Nada Riley, Susan Nelson, Chris Lincoln, Sister Katie Norris, our great friend who's back at DePaul again, Marcia Ott, Deirdre Graciano, Burl Clemens, all of the aldermen in between, Oberman, Eisendrath, Bernardini, Daly, and Michelle Smith. So thanks to tremendous work together, I think we turned around what was pretty rocky for a time into a process that makes us proud and grateful and a little sad to be leaving, but we're not leaving. So let me tell you about the two phases though. So the first phase was communicating, getting to know each other, and establishing a forum for communication on a regular basis where we're talking about things that matter to the hospital and things that matter to the community and working it through. And then I think it was several months, maybe even 36, before we got our actual 20-year master plan agreement, which included what it was that the hospital would agree not to do and what it was that the community would agree to allow the hospital to do. And it was a binding document that we lived by, and it had amendments to it. And you know, with the tremendous help from the community, we built the research facility, and they had lots of good ideas about how to make it better. The same is true about the Belden Halstead building. We added to the parking garage, and we worked out lots of things. So then, after about 10 years of working through all those developments, then we were able to enter a new phase of our work, which involved working on a community-wide forum, again with many people in this room, to do things together, not for us, but for the entire well-being of the Lincoln Park community. So our first year we worked on mentoring programs with Lincoln Park High School. We did LincolnParkConnect.com, which was a way to make everybody connected online when the computer situation got up. And then Living Green in Lincoln Park. Anyway, so those were the things that we were so happy to work with this community on. And that was kind of the second phase of it. So I'll just end by saying, we couldn't be the institution that we are, that Dr. Shulman described, without a marvelous community right here. And we're so grateful, and we look forward to the future. We're still going to have our Clark outpatient facility at Clark Deming, and our research facility is here. And we look forward to continuing that relationship with you all, and also to having the same kind of relationship at the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago.
Susan, I have a question. Did things come full circle, and when it was announced that Children's was going to move down to Streeterville, did you have any organizers come, any groups come and say, no, don't leave?
Well, I think there are some sad people, but I guess they would have to speak for themselves.
No, but I mean, did anyone approach the hospital and say, oh, we don't think that's a good idea? It's a great idea. The new facility is terrific. But after the rocky start, I wonder if it just
I
came
think that
around.
people were sad, definitely, when we announced that the main hospital was moving out.
Okay. Sam, Dr. Shulman. I have a question that was kind of bugging me when I was watching your presentation. Why were physicians not paid until about 1930? Why were there no paid physicians? Why were they all volunteers? That's about a 50-year span of only volunteers.
It's almost a 50-year span. And that's the way I think many children's hospitals grew up in that way. That
Children weren't important?
not that children weren't important, but that the revenue stream into a hospital back at the turn of the century, or even in 1920, the revenue stream could never be sufficient to support a spectrum of medical specialties, physicians and medical specialties to take care of the children in the way that they needed to. So that you needed a bronchoscopist who could put a tube down a child's throat. You needed a surgeon that could operate on the belly. You needed a lung specialist, and you needed, as time went on, you needed a radiologist, you needed a pathologist, and there was no way that the revenue could ever support that. So that the hospitals tried to create circumstances that would make it attractive for luminary physicians from around the city to want to practice at that institution, where they would have the opportunity to do some teaching. They would see an endless supply of very interesting, challenging patients. And that would lend some prestige to the physicians who could go back to their private practices where they were actually making their living. That they benefited from the experience and the opportunity to take care of children with challenging problems. But then as time went on, the economics evolved. And it was really only in the 40s, really right after World War II, when there was a flurry, not only at our hospital, but at other comparable hospitals around the country, of physicians becoming full-time employees of the institution. That's because of the change in the economic.
What are some of the firsts over the history of Children's Memorial? What are some of the firsts they have done, or if not in the country, maybe in the state?
Well, in the state, we have tremendous transplantation programs for children. We've done the first pediatric heart transplant in the state, and
Is that Dr. Farouk Idris?
Dr. Farouk Idris established the program together with Dr. Milton Paul, the cardiologist, and that program continues continue with Dr. Gus Brutus and now with Dr. Carl Backer. It is one of the, I think, the 5 top pediatric heart transplantation programs in the country. The liver transplantation program, which is enormously complex surgery and medicine to take care of those patients. We alternate with Pittsburgh for whether we have the biggest or the second biggest pediatric liver transplantation program. That was established by Dr. Rick Superina, who's really a liver surgeon, pediatric liver surgeon, and Dr. Peter Whittington, along with their colleagues. And kidney transplantation goes back into the 60s, and again, there have been several thousand kidney transplants performed in children at our hospital, and we've been one of the leaders in that. And I have to mention bone marrow transplantation, stem cell transplantation, which is really cutting edge therapy for many previously fatal conditions. So we've had tremendous programs evolve over the years in these areas with the help and support of all the other players. So I have to put a plug in for infectious diseases. You can't have great transplantation programs without great infectious disease doctors, because unfortunately transplantations have problems with infections, and they're complicated and serious infections. And so you need to have the whole team, and there's other specialties, of course, that come into play. I wanted to say one thing, because Sarah mentioned this is totally different, totally changing gears here. You mentioned about the milk, and we have to remember that back in the 1890s, 1900s, 1920s even, a safe milk supply was so critical. Babies died in tremendous numbers of gastrointestinal infections, diarrhea. And one of the culprits was contaminated milk. So if mothers couldn't breastfeed babies until they were a couple years old, or weren't interested in doing that, babies needed some kind of artificial formula, which of course we take so much for granted because they're clean products and they're not sterile, they're very clean and they're safe. But throughout the Western world, tremendous problems until the 20s. In Chicago, and Children's Memorial played a big part of this. Chicago was one of the first cities around 1915, 1916 that develop a citywide, safe, pure milk supply that parents could go and purchase on a daily or weekly basis, a supply of milk that really was sterile, pasteurized. It was really safe, and that made a tremendous difference. So in the basement of one of the old buildings, I have a picture of the milk laboratory where formulas were prepared and safe milk was prepared. And this is one of the things, just like a safe, like a sewage system and a safe water supply that we all take for granted. But there's a place in our hemisphere, in Haiti, for example, where there is no such thing as a competent sewage system or a safe water supply, and they're in the midst of a terrible cholera epidemic for several years. And Chicago was plagued with huge cholera epidemics in the 1870s, 80s, 90s. So these are advances that we all take for granted, and the hospital has played a role in a lot of this.
Can someone talk about one of the other tenets of Children's Memorial, which is advocacy for the child? And that's something that kind of came along later in life, because in the beginning it was something, you were taking care of sick children. And then all of a sudden, society created situations where children weren't safe and getting injured or getting sick because of the living situation they were in. So when did Susan, start this?
So advocacy really was going on from the very beginning with our caregivers, because they never were doing just treating the child in the hospital, but it's just that we didn't have it all organized so that people knew that everyone knew what the other was doing. So it's not that it was so brand new. It was just that we figured out a way to collaborate on key projects. So for example, in recent years, started at Children's was the consortium to lower obesity in Chicago's children. And it's not just Children's Memorial, it's Children's started it, but we really provided kind of the neutral ground for 500 plus organizations who care about childhood obesity to work together to develop a public policy agenda and a public health agenda, and to come together and to move that agenda forward in order to truly reduce childhood obesity. And so, and based on data. And so that was the first big thing that we had the honor of working on. That's going on right now throughout the entire state, and really good things happening from that. And then another one that just has taken on, thanks to the Founders Board, really was Pat McGoon's vision about two years ago in the fall after yet another shooting, a terrible shooting, and he called and he said, you know, I want to know what are we doing now and what work would we be doing on this gun violence thing. I know we've been looking at Kathy Christopher's in the audience, and God bless Kathy Christopher, the guru from the American Academy of Pediatrics, who led us in terms of our efforts toward advocacy, both in the gun violence and clock, and back to gun violence again. He said, tell me what we're doing, what should we be doing, and come back to me. And I wanted the Founders Board involved, of course, because they wanted to be involved, because they're on fire. So we met with all of our clinical smart people, including Kathy and Dr. Karen Sheehan, and all the people who touch gun violence, and Jennifer Carton, who's the director of our Child Health Data Lab, which Kathy Christopher started. And we did an audit, and we figured out what are all the things that we're doing right now to reduce violence for children in the city of Chicago. And so this really remarkable chart that we were all so proud of, but we hadn't seen it until it was done, was produced. And then the public health mind said, okay, what work would we be doing from the public health model, which is how Kathy Christopher taught us all. You know, just like with cholera, why is the water bad? You've got a bad faucet. Why are people dying of gun violence? Because you've got a gun, and a gun is legal, we gotta get rid of it. So anyway, we created with the Founders Board leadership an entity just like the Consortium to Lower Obesity in Chicago's Children, but it's on gun violence. And we've got a whole bunch of people that are, every player in gun violence in the city is involved in it, and we hosted the first gathering. We did listening sessions from all these people to say, what is it, what do you think the problems are, what should we be doing, and then we factored that into a plan. And what else, Sarah?
It's just a very exciting initiative because there are all these little pockets of people doing great things within the city, and all of a sudden they're coming together and finding ways that they can work together, energize each other, not duplicate efforts, become stronger together. So it's called Strengthening Chicago's Youth. And it's really exciting. It's giving a bigger voice to something that everybody's been working about and feeling passionate about, but now have a better voice. It's pretty exciting.
We're going to take questions in one moment. I want to ask one other question and to throw it out here, and it's a huge part of Children's Memorial, and it's remaining here in Lincoln Park, and that's committed. That's the research center. And that started how many years ago now? Has Camille been there?
Maybe
20?
I'm close.
And what is coming out of there right now? What are the things that that in another few years are being researched there now that are just going to blow people away?
Well, there's lots of genetic research because genetics is a science that has just exploded in terms of technology in the last 5 to 10 years, and so there are great advances being made in genetics. Megan spoke about the cystic fibrosis genetics. Dr. Ann Harris is doing some great work there, and there's advances in understanding of some of the factors involved in pediatric liver disease. Research is ongoing. So there's a wide spectrum of biology, and genetics, and other neurosurgical
stand in terms of other pediatric research centers in the country? And how many are there out there? Lots?
There's not lots, but it's not just a handful. There's probably 20 or 25 pediatric research centers. I think we're in the top 5, and we hope we're moving higher, but we're certainly in the upper echelon.
We would like to, oh, go ahead.
Can I just give you one more first? Please. It's a little off beaten track, but it's a fun one. I just learned this. So during World War II, of course, many of the men were away, and we were limping along trying to figure out things, and we had started all these rummage sales, which then turned into the white elephant that you all know. And we had a truck, and the truck was running around, on North Shore picking up all their donations. All of a sudden, we didn't have a driver. So a woman from the Founders Board became the first woman ever to get the Illinois commercial driver's license, so she could drive that truck and came out so there's the first.
Also during World War II, the number of women physicians, which was vanishingly small prior to that time, actually increased. There was active recruitment of women residents who were, a small number were tolerated, but not really encouraged in the period up to World War II. But because so many men were being drafted and disappearing, that there was a number of women physicians at both training levels as well as at staff physician levels.
What's the ratio now, do you know?
Well, in medical school.
No, but I mean at children.
At children, I would say
Approximately.
close to 40% of our physicians are women now. And each year I think the number is going up because more than half of the medical school graduates in the last 5 years have been women. And a disproportionate number of women going to pediatrics. So that's all good things.
All good. All right, we would love to have your questions. If you'll go right up to the microphone, anyone has the first question? And maybe, all right, we'll start with you. Just say, oh, they kind of, yeah, there we go. Just say your name.
Have to?
Yes.
That's a joke. Alan Mellis. First of all, I'd like to say how wonderful it's been working with Susan. She's pretty much a newcomer to our community relations process over 25 years. But what's been very nice that she listened. She's a very, very wonderful person and recognized that the community has a lot of good input. I remember when we were negotiating the research building, the hospital said in fact that we cast shadows across the street, and then I remember a year later that Dr. Merkel was complaining his office was too small, so that actually made me feel good. But I think also most of the committee members who had children always, when they joined the committee, the relations committee, always said how their children were treated at the hospital. So I think everybody on our committee, even though we might have had differences on things, all realized how important the hospital was. And the question is really a follow-up to what something Janet said earlier. This is probably addressed to Susan, what are your plans to commemorate Children's Memorial Hospital being here? I know we have a Julie Porter Park, but I think, and again, you might not have them, there should be something here that celebrates 130 years that the hospital's been here.
Yes, well, we are having a closing ceremony to honor that on June 14th, and everyone is going to be invited. So
I was thinking more permanent.
a permanent.
So something to think about.
Yes.
Some sort of memorial, a children's memorial, that stands there and says, this is where an important Chicago health institution stood for 130 years. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you very much.
It's a great idea. The children's ceremony will be a wonderful.
Let's have this gentleman in back. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the affiliation that Children's Memorial had with the U of C in the past. And then you also mentioned the overall spirit of cooperation. Now, I was just wondering, is there any cooperation between Comer's Children's Hospital and Children's Memorial? Do you work on things together or have a certain problem in the city you work on?
Okay, we've worked with them on on pediatric public policy issues for many, many years. Because I do government relations as well. So absolutely, we worked hard on access to care for kids on Medicaid, funding for Medicaid, gun violence things. One of the things that is a big problem is that pediatric specialists, there aren't enough of them, number one, but also they're very poorly reimbursed for Medicaid, like 35 cents on the dollar of cost. We work with UC on that on behalf of children because we know that children can't access care because a lot of people can't afford to see them. So yeah, there's some cooperation.
There is. I know that on a personal level. I know a family that lives over in Michigan, and they have a son who has a certain genetic condition. It's a very special type of dwarfism. And they had gone to Comer's, and they brought me their x-rays and wondered if there was anybody at Children's who could look at them. And I forget the doctor over at the research center, and he's looking and goes, I've seen these before. So he actually had seen Avery's little, I guess because it is so unusual, his condition, that someone slipped it to him over at the research center so they could take a look at them and evaluate them.
Well, they actually, we get referrals from all the other children's hospitals because it's like in our NICU, it's kind of like a level 4 NICU, and so we get referrals from UMC, from Rush, from all the other children's hospitals too.
Comer's, they have a new facility too, don't they, Comer's?
Yes, they have a very nice facility.
Yeah.
So, I think the relationship is a very interesting one because at one level we're sort of competitors, but at another level we all have the same goal of improving pediatric health care for the city's children and the area's children. My infectious disease group has had joint meetings with the University of Chicago infectious disease group. We talk to each other, we bounce ideas off of each other. There's a few, but only a few instances of actual research collaboration, but there are some. And it's all a very collegial relationship. It's my alma mater. Although, they say that moving from one hospital into another is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. For me, it's really been it's going to be a twice-in-a-lifetime experience because as an intern at the University of Chicago, I remember pushing cribs from the old Bob Roberts Hospital to the brand spanking new Weiler Children's Hospital, which has now been succeeded by the Comer Children's Hospital, Baine Hospital. So for me, it's a twice-in-a-lifetime experience, but it really is an unusual experience.
It's wonderful to hear the spirit of cooperation going on, and now perhaps we'll find a way to spread that to the city council somehow.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my question. My name is Ellen Zielinski, and I'm wondering, maybe Sarah or Susan, Dr. Shulman, Janet might know, who are some of the families from Lincoln Park or the luminary Chicago families in history who have supported the hospital over the years, possibly DePaul University too, and some of the philanthropists?
Sarah, that sounds like a good one for you.
Well, I would say, first of all, every name in Chicago is on the list of people who give to children. All the names you know, all the names you don't know of, the corporations, the schools, the institutions, everybody has really participated. It's quite amazing the level of philanthropy that has come to Children's Way. I think everybody wants to feel part of our family, so I almost can't even separate anybody else. I feel very comfortable saying everybody.
As the historian group, I want to say that the hospital is very fortunate that Mrs. Porter's family was exceptionally generous and very wealthy. Her family owned lots of property in the city, probably owned half of Lincoln Park at the time. I'm not sure that's exactly. They owned and she was very generous. And in 1900, sitting down writing a check for $75,000, that was a lot of money. But I've always wondered why we have this oddly named section of the hospital called the Jones-Wilson Building. And then when I started reading about the history of the hospital, Thomas D. Jones was chairman of the board of directors for some 25 years in the early decades of the 20th century. And the Wilson family, there were a series of Wilsons, and there was an Agnes Wilson pavilion, and there was another Wilson pavilion, and currently we have, if you walk on Orchard, you can see there's two locked up doorways that still say the Thomas D. Jones Memorial Pavilion and a Wilson Pavilion. So Martha Wilson was a young lady who died early in life, and her family became very generous contributors to us. So I think all through the history, the hospital has been very fortunate. It's not simply fortunate, it's obviously been planning and getting the word out, et cetera, of having community members that have been extremely generous in their support, and we still do today. And I was struck today walking around the Lurie building that there are a lot of named areas, and these are names I was completely unfamiliar with. People that I hadn't recognized had been previous donors. Maybe they had, but I didn't know that. But I think that as time goes on, we have a broadening network of generous donors, which is extremely instrumental in the success of our current hospital and future hospital.
Yes, sir. You can take one.
It's working. Done?
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to take Alan's idea about having something to commemorate the fact that children suspended all these years. It's a great idea. But it reminds me of a story. Several years ago, my wife and my son and I went to Paris. And one afternoon, my wife decided to go shopping. My son and I decided to go find a Bastille. So we got on the subway, we followed this tourist map, and we got the word that the Bastille was supposed to be. We looked around, couldn't find it. And finally, this very kind man walked up to us and he said, Can I help you? And we said, yeah, we're looking for the Bastille. He said, well, you're standing on it. And there was his plaque. There it is, right there. So I would suggest, whatever you decide to do, don't make it a plaque on the sidewalk. Make it something somebody can see and remember and enjoy.
Good one. Great point. Thank you.
We actually did have a plaque on the northwest corner of Fullerton and Orchard in front of the current Nellie Black building, which was the site of the 1884 22-bed hospital. There was a plaque on the ground to commemorate the original building. But over time it got cracked and worn and ultimately had to be removed. So that's another reason maybe it's not best where people walk.
Yes, ma'am.
This is kind of a comment to Maggie. Maggie, I took care of you from 96 to 99 in the radiology.
Sorry.
No dirt. Anyway, I just want to tell you that what you said, I have several pictures of kids on my piano at home, 4 of my own, a lot of nieces and nephews, and some are patients at Children's, and some are living and some are in heaven now. And some of them are on my refrigerator, and you are on my refrigerator. And that is because, Maggie, in, I don't know if it was 96 to 99, but through those 3 years I worked at the station in interventional radiology. I've been here since '85, so I've pretty much worked about everywhere. But you and myself and Dr. Mimi, at the time Coates, but now Saker, you used to get your PICC lines without sedation.
I hate those things.
I know you did.
I have my report, thank God, but
Thank God. But you were one of our star patients, and one time there was no transporter to take you back upstairs to your room on 9. So Dr. Mimi, I think it was Coates, and now she's Saker, we said, we're taking Maggie up. So we took you up in, I don't know if it was a gurney or a chair or whatever, and we brought you to your room, and your mom took a picture of it. Yes, I love it. And so she mailed it to me. It's on my refrigerator. But what I want to say to you, Maggie, is you made our hearts so filled. Your courage and your attitude about life, not just getting through this next infection or anything, but I knew in your eyes, and so did Mimi, that you had a purpose, that you had a specific purpose And that's why your resilience and your health, you've been blessed, I think, with so much good health, and Dr. McCauley and all the pulmonologists have helped you. But you give to us the inspiration to kind of get up the next morning and do it again. So I thank you. Thank you.
To add to that, you guys have kept me alive, physically and psychologically. You kept me going. I wouldn't be here without all of you taking care of me and keeping me laughing and everything else. Because without that, I truly would not be the person I am today without those experiences. The hospital has shaped me, and I'm now 24 and moving to California. I'm living a life because of all of you. So thank you. Oh, and also I just want to say, Miss Betty, because she also has kept me alive with that nummy food. The grilled cheeses are the best, and that woman is something so special to this institution. And I look forward to going to the hospital because of her grilled cheeses. So I had to mention Miss Becky.
Would there be any other reason? Anyone else? Don't be shy.
Could I just answer one of Alan's questions about families? And this is just because I know this is a special family for DePaul also. And that is the Daly family. And we just last week had the dedication of a special garden called Kevin's Garden at our Ann Robert H. Lloyd Children's Hospital. In honor of Kevin Daly, who had spina bifida and didn't even make it past his 3rd birthday. But the Dalys, because of their sorrow with Kevin, channeled all of that into being just astonishing champions for children everywhere they went. The mayor, wherever he was, he would say, stop, look at a child, help mom. They implored us to do what was right for the child. And Maggie, After School Matters, I don't mean just children's, although they were very, very supportive of our mission for more than 20 years. Such a legacy, such a beautiful legacy that came from the life of Kevin Daly. And anyway, I know that they did so many beautiful things for our whole city. And I just wanted to mention that because I know they're special friends at DePaul also.
Actually,
We can give someone can bring the mic, girl. Look at me. Someone can bring it to you, right?
Sure.
Oh, look at Mom.
There we go.
Thank you. At one time, I remember you were going to build a hospital for children with spinal bifida, and it was going to be in the suburbs, but I never heard anything after the first one or two first things, and it just stopped. I never heard any more about it. And this was about 12, 15 years ago.
Well, the one related thing I can think of is that Dr. David McClung, who's a neurosurgeon and who was really in this hemisphere, took care of more kids with spina bifida than any other doctor. And his passion was, when I first met him, when I first got there, he said, I want these children to become tax-paying citizens and to live full lives. And so in his career, there were so many advances, and the kids did grow up, and now they're adults. And so then a few years ago, actually working with Mayor Daly, they did open the Amherst Center, which is an independent living facility. I think that they bought the land for $1 from the city of Chicago to build this independent living facility where a lot of our grown-up patients live now. So it could be related to that. I'm not sure. But.
Also, there are a number of specialized camps that are run, and I wonder if there might be one for spina bifida. There is. Okay, so maybe more into that would be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maybe you should talk about, we're just talking about the hospital and the research center, but there are so many other things that Children's Memorial has out there that people don't know about. That
run at the Aon building, play golf, any number of places all summer. Is that what you mean? Like,
things
sort of our fundraising
that are connected to the hospital in some way, shape, or form that you wouldn't normally think about. Fundraising, some of the fundraising is one thing. Camps.
Camp Courage, One Step at a Time camp, where the kids families, but it's also, it builds their confidence and kids love to go to camp. We have people in the audience who can remember some to tell. We have some children's employees out there.
I'll speak up.
I could also add the Heartlight program that we have here for bereaved families. And it not only services children, but the greater Chicagoland area for families who've lost a child at Children's or any other facilities that don't have the type of bereavement program that we do. And we service also Spanish-speaking families, because that is not a service anywhere else in Chicago. So I know that is a very special service that we provide here.
Any other questions?
Our techie guy.
Yeah. I was actually, I was once at Children's. I survived a blood disease called cyclic neutropenia. And I was given a clean bill of health, I think I was 4 or 3. And I was wondering if anybody was there maybe 17 years ago, maybe working in that wing or something that I could actually thank for saving my life, I guess. And giving me an actual life. My name is Nathan Seeloff. I don't expect anybody to remember me. I was like 2 or 3, but if there's anybody there, 17, 15 years ago.
So I've been in children for 33 years.
Yeah. So of course,
sometimes infectious disease doctors take care of those sites. Sometimes, often the hematologists take care of that problem because it's really a white blood cell problem. And sometimes the immunologist, Dr. Lauren Pockman, has been at Shulman significantly longer than I have, as a head of immunology for most of that period of time. So that I know that leukemia is one of her major interests. So that you give me her name here slowly, I will tell her that you said hello.
my name is Nathan Seeloff.
Seeloff?
Seeloff with an S. Thank you, I appreciate it.
I'm Kathy DeGraff. I work at DePaul. I'm the archivist, and I will just say to Al and to a few others that there will be some permanent record of children's memorial archives at DePaul University in the archives, with the records that we have gathered both from the Lincoln Park Conservation Association deposits over time and some of the recent materials from Children's that we are adding to the collections even as we speak. Thank you. So whether there is a plaque on the street or a dedication ceremony, at least Children's will remain as a research record and repository at DePaul.
My name is Lori Hillman, and I'm a Lincoln Parker, as well as a children's employee for 21 years. And Children's was only supposed to be a temporary job for me. I was between business jobs, and here I am, I was a nurse in the operating room with Dr. Oliver, Dr. Lewis, and now I'm working on the electronic medical record. But the best thing about Children's, besides the patients, is that the people that work there are incredible. I came from Rush, a big facility, and it was, I called it the adult hospital. And the people are just totally different there who work there. We have personalities. We work as a team. I think that's the whole thing. Doctors, nurses, social workers, everybody works as a team. And all of us who work there, we want to be children. We want to have fun. And that's really, I think, the bottom line for the institution. And I'm glad I'm still here.
We're almost finished here, so I'd really like to ask all 4 of you a 2-part question. And I'm going to start with you, Stan. What is it you're going to, what was your best moment at the old facility, which will soon be the old facility, and what are you looking forward to at the new facility?
Wow.
Now, see, these three have time to think.
I know.
My interest, my major research interest and clinical interest in my field is related to what we call Kawasaki disease. Some of you may have heard of it, most of you probably haven't. But this is a disease of young children, primarily. We get red eyes, rash, red lips, swollen hands and feet, and swollen lymph glands in the neck. For all the world, it looks like an infectious disease, but it causes heart disease. It causes coronary artery heart disease, which can be so severe that children need to have bypass surgery, just like an adult, or even rarely a heart transplant to survive. So when I came to Children's 33 years ago, I realized that there were a lot of patients with this disorder. My interest had always been in the intersection of cardiology and infectious diseases. Rheumatic fever, as Mrs. Porter's child died of, was my first research interest. Rheumatic fever, fortunately, has become a more and more rare disease over the last decades. But Kawasaki disease, another disease that looks like an infection that causes heart disease, has become very common. We treated 72 children last year and 70 children the year before. So this is not an extremely rare disease at all. We're treating it virtually every week. So we had the opportunity in the 80s to work on a new form of treatment. We worked with several other children's hospitals and proved that treatment with a medicine called intravenous gamma globulin was highly effective in preventing the heart disease from developing in these children. And that, to me, has been an extremely special relationship that I've had with the Kawasaki patients. We treated more than 2,000 patients in my time with children. I keep running into families all the time. Called up to complain about a carpet cleaning bill, and the lady said, "Stop complaining, stop complaining. You treated my child 15 years ago with Kawasaki disease." Or a new doctor has joined my internist practice. And it turns out that I treated her when she was 6 years old. Kawasaki disease, and now she'll be treating me. So we are working very hard and knocking on the door of finding what the cause is of this, and we're really narrowing it down with Williamson virus. We can see it, but we haven't yet been able to grow it or name it. So to me, that's been not a single moment, but an ongoing saga with my relationship with children and the large volume of patients that we are able to see with this condition. And what am I looking forward to in the new hospital, other than finally, of course, identifying what the cause of this important disease is that one of the hats I wear is that for the last 33 years I've been in charge of hospital infection control. And that means the prevention of hospital-acquired infections, which can be, one sick child can transmit whatever virus or germ that he has to another patient, for example, and makes that patient's condition worse. So we work very hard trying to prevent transmission of infections from one patient who has the infection to a patient who doesn't have the infection that could be susceptible. So in the new hospital, from my perspective, the greatest thing is that we'll have all private rooms. No patients will share the same room. And that goes a tremendous distance to help prevent transmission of hospital-acquired infections. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Susan?
I would say one of the highlights is absolutely the 20-year master plan agreement that we struck after a very rocky time initially, and all of the great things that came from it. If it's okay, can I say one other thing?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing, which is really about the old hospital and the new, is it's really this thread that keeps us all wanting to stay involved. That starts with the child. And it's almost like it's a contagious thing, because the child is sick and the child propels the parent to be the advocate, which propels the caregivers to do everything they can. And we catch it. It's a thread that ties us all together. And it's a circle, and it's just so large, and it's so powerful, no matter what the journey is along the way. And it's such a gift. And so that's what I appreciate the most from the past, and what I look forward to stay with in the future. It's absolutely great.
So the things that I like the most here are all the little everyday things that happen. The hellos, the doctors, the nurses, the patients, going up to see a mom, holding a baby, people laughing down in the cafeteria, just in the chapel, all the everyday things here. That there's just such an incredible aura of care and hope and courage. It's astounding. So that's what we have now, that I love every single day. The thing that I'm really looking forward to, so I came in on Monday morning, it's Monday morning, I'm not paying attention. The first stages of the mock move were going on. So they were, we're moving all the patients on June 9th. And on Monday, they did a real practice. There's been all sorts of, on the table practice. And now we're taking patients, 9 patients, and practicing, taking them down from their floor, putting them in an ambulance, taking the ambulance, taking them to the hospital, see how it works. It was seamless. It was competent. It was, everybody was ready. And I thought, there's the hope of the future. So that was it.
Well, you're moving.
I am.
But are you moving before the move into the hospital?
Unfortunately, I am, yes. So, in a way, I'm definitely closing the door on the old children's by completely removing myself from Chicago and just leaving. It might be easier, separation anxiety. It's hard to pinpoint a moment, obviously. But, before there was infection control, I had a lot of friends with CF who passed away over the years, but we had tons of fun in that hospital together. Before there was much safety, we also had water fights. Nurses said, we don't see anything, nothing happened. But also, I had a doctor who, when I was young, bet me that I could not keep my mouth shut for 24 hours. I have a hard time not talking. So he bet me $20, and I said, I'll do it. And the next day, I wrote a big sign that says, Dr. Michelson, you owe me $20, and all the nurses said, yeah, she didn't speak a word. It was amazing, she didn't speak a word. And that was one of my favorite moments, because I said, ha. But, my favorite moments was the laughter, and the people who kept pushing me to do better, stay healthy. And what I hope for the future of Lurie Children's is that same personality of Children's here. Like I said, those people make this institution wonderful, the staff. And I know they will do such an amazing job of keeping that personality going towards the new hospital, and the patients to come after me. I know we'll have amazing memories as well, and we'll appreciate everything that this hospital has done for them.
My one memory is that hospital saved my son's life, and I will never forget it. Thank you all.
Well, on that note, we wanted to celebrate and honor Children's Memorial Hospital tonight, and these 5 people could not have been more perfect. So Janet Davies, Maggie Williamson, Sarah Baine, Susan Gordon, and Dr. Stan Shulman, we will be forever in your debt, not only for tonight, but for all you've done for Children's and for this community. I would be remiss if I did not mention that sitting in the back of the room, in his usual unassuming way, is Pat Magoon, the President and CEO of Children's Memorial Hospital. I would also be remiss if I didn't say these programs don't happen magically, and there have been a number of people that helped to make this program and all our 24 programs wonderful. The first person I want to thank tonight is Ken LeBach from Children's Memorial Hospital. We could not have done this without you. And we have a great band. Secondly, we have the members of our Research Initiative Committee who are here. They do all the planning for these programs, and their input is unbelievable. So I would just ask those of you, don't be shy like you usually are, and stand up, please, and be appreciated. I see you around. And lastly, a wonderful staff from the Community and Government Relations Office. Julie Enns, our very own Vanna White, who's about to come and bring gifts to our panelists. And Shauna Smith, who's out there, always being humble. Some of the people have disappeared. And thank you, all of you, for coming. And now, prepare.